right, Ryan, we'll just give it a couple more minutes to let folks come in and then we'll get started.
Perfect.
Great. Yeah, for those of you just joining, welcome. We'll get kicked off here in just a minute. Please just give a brief intro of who you are in the chat box. Again, we'd love to see who's all here joining us this afternoon. I guess evening. Yeah, evening, 7 o'clock here in Atlanta. But okay, well, Ryan, let's get started. Let me start the recording and then you can screen share and we'll get going.
Recording in progress.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining. I'll just say a couple words here before Ryan gets started. I'm Alex Nielsen. I'm the Operations Director with Incremental Development Alliance. I am your point of contact for all things training events and training opportunities with this organization. We are so excited to be here. This has been kind of not a long time coming, but we're very excited to be in Corpus Christi. And just a couple of housekeeping items. If you're more than welcome to leave your camera on during this lecture. Please keep your computers, phones muted for the time being. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. And also, if you do have any questions throughout the duration of this lecture, please direct them to the chat box and we'll be sure that we answer all of them. So with that, Ryan, I will leave it to you.
Thanks, Alex. Well, howdy, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Ryan Terry. I'm one of the faculty members with the Incremental Development Alliance. And I'm so happy to be here with you today and talking about incremental development and the work that we do and that we're going to be doing in partnership with you and the City of Corpus Christi. So this is our kickoff recruitment lecture. So we're hoping that many of you who are on this call right now will be joining us in our future training opportunities and that hopefully you too will become small scale developers in the City of Corpus Christi. So a little bit about me before we get started. So I have my own development company called R&T Studio. I'm located in Bryan, College Station, so not too far up the road. And in addition to my development work here in town, I sit on the City Historic Landmark Commission, and I also sit on our downtown tax increment reinvestment zone board. So do a little bit of public service work there. And then I've been working with IncDev for, I guess, going on 6 years now. So just really one of the beginning faculty members. So it's been my pleasure and honor to work with IncDev over these years, and we're excited about what we've got in store for you. So real quick, sorry, I need to minimize my. So today, all we're really going to be talking with you is real estate for regular people, right? I'll get into a little bit more about my background a little later, but suffice it to say, I didn't grow up in the real estate business. I have no special training, formal schooling in real estate, right? There's no, and that's one of the great things about this work is that there's no gateways or barriers to entry or long and unpaid internships that you have to go through in order to become a real estate developer. What it really takes is cultivating a little bit of know-how, a couple of key relationships, and then a whole lot of work. And so it's exciting that we've seen people come through these trainings from all walks of life, from all different times of life, and have really done amazing things. So before we get too much further into it, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, the City of Corpus Christi. Dan from the City of Corpus is going to talk to us a little bit about the trainings. Dan?
All right, thank you very much, Ryan. My name is Dan McGinn. I'm the director of the planning department here at the City of Corpus Christi, and just wanted to thank everyone for joining us for this evening. And I wanted to thank the Incremental Development Alliance team for putting this on. I also wanted to give a thanks to Karen Costanza with our planning group. She's worked really hard in putting a lot of this together, and we're really excited to be able to bring this program and future small scale development trainings to our community. I think that many of you will find that this topic of small scale and infill development is pertinent to the work we're doing here in promoting revitalization of different areas of our city. Through our various long-range planning efforts across the community, we identified a need to bring this type of training series and build local capacity that will promote local development and strengthen our neighborhoods. So again, thank you for participating, and I will pass it back to Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. So what and who is Incremental Development Alliance? We're a nonprofit educational organization. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we travel all over the country teaching people about small scale real estate development as a tool to revitalize and grow their communities in a way that we feel is healthy and productive for everyone in the community. And our stated mission goal is to cultivate 1,000 small developers in the cities that they love. So we've been around since 2015, and we've traveled all over the country. We've trained thousands of people at this point. And we've seen all sorts of situations: big towns, big cities, small cities, places where their pressures are lots and lots of growth and maintaining affordability, and places where they're really working to gain traction after long periods of economic downturn. So we've seen a lot of different situations, a lot of different contexts, and we feel strongly that the things that we're teaching you are universal principles that you can take and apply to your own situation. I'm not here to tell you it's a one size fits all, right? There's going to be certain things that we'll talk about in our trainings that are going to apply more to your context or less to your context. But we feel strongly that the underlying philosophy is what really makes this organization and our message important to all the cities that we work with. So what does that really mean when it comes down to it? Well, we're basically in the business of teaching doers, okay? There are a lot of organizations out there that teach talkers, that people who just want to sit around and talk about their problems or talk about the woulda, coulda, shouldas, or if we only had this, right? And the truth is, in most places, no one's coming to solve your problems for you. If you're in a town where you've had tough times, no one's coming to save you. And if you're in a town where you've got lots of growth pressure, guess what? No one's going to fix your affordability issues or your market issues, right? You have to do the work. It's up to the people who live there. And so we're in the business of training those people on the ground, the small business owners, the neighborhood advocates, the realtors, the builders, the tradespeople, all the people that go into making a successful neighborhood, a successful city, and a successful place. We train those people to do this work. And then we also coach the cities and communities that they work in, right? Because without an effective partnership between the people doing the work and the city who's helping grease the skids and helping things happen, it's really difficult to get good stuff done. And so we also coach civic groups, government agencies, cities, township governments, all those sorts of folks, public sector people, to help make sure that you can do the work that's so vital to getting done, right? And then we also connect both of those people, right? Those types of folks. So, I could train you to do one thing, and I could coach up I could talk to Dan at the city all day long, but I've got to make sure that y'all know each other and that you understand what y'all are trying to accomplish and that y'all are working together. So that's what we do. So tonight, in our future trainings, we'll get into all the nitty gritty of, everything from how do you design and read a pro forma to how do you do a hasty site plan and everything in between. But tonight we really want to talk about why. Why do we do this work? Why is it important? And what do we really mean when we talk about incremental development? So this is what we're going to talk about tonight. And we're going to start off, why are we all here? Okay. And I want y'all to just kind of take in this question. And we ask this question in every single place that we go to. And it's real simple. Are you getting the kind of real estate projects you want to see in your city, in your neighborhood, in your place? And in the vast majority of the places that we go, that we work in, the answer by and large is no, right? You may not be getting the right kind of projects coming up. Maybe they're too expensive, maybe they're ugly, maybe they're or destroying the fabric of your neighborhood, or conversely, maybe you're getting no projects. Maybe nobody's doing anything in your neighborhood, right? There's all sorts of situations, but in most places that we work, generally people think things could be done better, right? And this has been our experience in all, in the towns that we work in, in my town that I work in. I started doing this work because I saw a downtown that had lots of opportunity, but no one was doing any projects. No one was doing anything. So we started doing some projects and we wanted to be part of that revitalization effort. So, so if the answer to this question is no, then my next question is, why not? Why are you not getting those sorts of projects that you want? So let's talk about that. And based on our experience in lots of different places that we go to, there are a couple of different reasons why this can happen. The development industry, real estate development as a business, has become very specialized. And it has become an industry that favors economies of scale in most places. So the most successful people in the development world who make the most money tend to build the largest projects. These are the types of companies that build 2,000 homes in a new subdivision, or they build a brand new condo tower in the middle of Dallas, right? They do big, tens of millions of dollars in projects, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in projects. They rely on those economies of scale, and they're hyper specialized, meaning if I'm a large home builder, if I'm Pulte Homes or I'm Ryan Homes and I build, tens of thousands of homes a year, guess what I don't do? I don't build shopping malls. I don't build hotels. I don't build warehouses. I don't build Main Street storefronts. I build tract homes in large subdivisions. And that's the same thing for every other type of person. And it's kind of interesting. I actually have a good friend that I grew up with in high school, and he is a broker, real estate broker, and he specializes in brokerage for tilt wall construction warehouses that are over 100,000 square feet. That's all he does, day in, day out, every day. So if it's under 100,000 square feet, he doesn't even look at it, and it's all the same, right? It is a commodity business in his world, right? And that's most of the industry. Most of the industry has adapted to that, and we'll talk about that later, why that has happened. The other thing that we see in a lot of places is that a lot of times the development business in those towns relies on an extractive model. And what do I mean when I say extractive? Well, a lot of real estate development practice businesses are predicated on an economic model that's very similar to strip mining, right? You go in, you build a big project, you gain as many tax breaks and concessions from the local government as absolutely possible, right? You build the cheapest building you can build because you're looking to amortize that building, and you're creating a depreciation schedule for a building. So if Walmart comes in or any of the big box stores, like those buildings are designed to depreciate in 7.5 years. So every little bolt, nut, wall system in that Walmart is designed to be completely depreciated on a 7.5 year schedule, right? So what does that mean? Well, that means that typically that building, while it may provide some good uses, in the long run is usually a bad bet for the place that it's located in, meaning it's sending money out of that city or that town or that neighborhood. And that's both because most of the time those companies are not based in those cities. So they don't bank in that city, meaning the money that they take out goes to another bank, which gets lent out in some other city, probably in New York or Delaware or somewhere else, right? But also typically they don't end up being great long-term investments from a tax-based scenario, paying money back into the city coffers so that you can afford things like fixing potholes and paying for schools, okay? So, part of this is, why does this happen? Well, part of it is that regulations and finance favor inflexible building types. We've created a system since the 1940s that has basically prevented buildings from adapting over time. By and large, we've adopted land use regulations that require us to build buildings that can do one thing, because that's the only use that they're approved for. Well, what does that mean? That means that I can never take that old building and turn it into a couple of apartments, right? It can only ever be a warehouse. Well, that's really not useful if I want to revitalize an old downtown where it used to be industrial, but now I'm trying to make it more residential. Well, if it's still zoned industrial, you can't do anything, right? I mean, that's just the reality. And of course, this is all compounded by the issue that it's hard building things. It's hard finding the construction trades to do it, right? Getting a reliable contractor to show up, because there's lots of work right now. Even with inflation and everything going on, it's tough to find people, because in 2008, when the market crashed, a lot of people left the industry and never came back. And there is enormous job short, or I should say, there's an enormous lack of availability of trades, right? There's a crunch in the labor market. And frankly, it's difficult work, and we're a society that doesn't have any sort of on-ramp to get into this business. If you ask people who become developers, a lot of people become developers by accident, and because you don't go to school for this, there's no degree for this, right? You just kind of learn it. And so what we're hoping to do is create an avenue for normal people to do the work and fill the holes in the places that they love and care about. So now this chart is basically talking everything I just went over, right? And all it's meant to do is illustrate to you that all these problems create a self-reinforcing vicious cycle, right? The development doesn't benefit the locals. That creates neighborhood opposition because they don't like what's getting built, and NIMBYism. Then you get more fees, more regulation, which means it's harder to build buildings. So you have more barriers to entry. So only the big developers can afford to actually do anything, because all the small guys can't even play in that pond. Then they build really big buildings that are profitable for big developers, which means they get more buildings that don't benefit the locals, right? It's pretty simple and pretty depressing, right? So this is what we are focusing on. So we're looking to create a lower barrier of entry to help you build what you want in your city and in your town, right? and because we strongly feel that you are poised to respond to the actual market needs of your place, not somebody on Wall Street looking at a spreadsheet about what they think the market absorption rate in Corpus Christi, Texas is going to be, right? We need somebody who walks their dog in that neighborhood every day and understands, you know what we really need? We really need a little coffee shop on the corner. Or you know what we really need? We really need someone to fix up those really rundown duplexes and make them really nice and get some great tenants in there, right? That's the type of stuff that we're talking about. So, and we feel that that's a great opportunity, right? So what's incremental development? Real simply, you know, it's a mouthful, I'll admit it, right? So here's what we're talking about. 0 to 3 stories, so relatively small buildings. It's for and by you and your neighbors, right? It's locally built, and it evolves over time. That's really all we're talking about, right? Small buildings, locally built, and they do different things over the lifespan of those buildings. Maybe they're rehabs, maybe they're new construction, doesn't matter, right? Different places are going to need different things at different points. So, and we believe that cities are better when you're actually doing the work, when the people who live there are in charge of doing the work and getting stuff built and maintained, right? It's really hard to ignore people at the city government level, and it's really hard to ignore people when they're your neighbors, right? You know, that's a whole different conversation when your neighbor says, hey, what would you think if we had a little 4-plex apartment building in the corner of our neighborhood, than if someone came in from out of state and said, I want to buy up half the block and put a 10-story condo tower in your neighborhood. Totally different conversation, right? Okay. So why is that? Well, you're local. That means you have skin in the game, right? Your livelihood, the livelihood of your friends, your relatives, your children, your grandchildren are all tied up in that place. Okay, you care, and you care in a way that someone who's not from there and who doesn't live there can't ever care about that place, right? And because you care, you're more likely to build a lovable building, something that people actually want in their neighborhood, something that people, you know, there are always buildings that people can think of wherever they live that people really are attracted to, right? Whether it's the little local coffee shop or bodega, whether it's that really cute house on the corner, right? Everyone knows those buildings. And everyone also can instinctively recognize that those sorts of buildings are go a long way to making our places that are charming and places that people want to be. Okay. You know, thirdly, honestly, if you're doing the work, then you're going to be hiring local people. You know, that's good for your economy. It's good for Corpus Christi if you're hiring people who live in Corpus Christi. You know, if you're banking in Corpus Christi, if that money is getting recycled into your local economy. Okay. It's a lot better than if somebody comes in and every dollar that they take in is going to a bank out of state, because you'll never see that money in your local economy again. Okay. So, and the key to this process, and the key that we always talk about, you know, this says the process builds skills and relationships, but that's really what this business is about. It's know-how, which is really basic. You know, the know-how is not rocket science. This is not a PhD thesis level sort of work. You know, it's kind of 7th grade math on some Excel spreadsheets, and some really basic knowledge about how real estate works. And it's a little bit of design. Okay. It's not crazy. But the glue that holds it together are those relationships. Okay. You know, so this is basically what you get today. And I bet this actually looks kind of familiar to folks in Corpus, right? You get towers or subdivisions. Take your pick. Especially when it comes to residential stuff. In most places, this is your options, because that's what the larger development industry has specialized in doing. They build big towers or they build big subdivisions. Oh, and by the way, so this picture, that's on the luxury end of the spectrum. You know, heaven forbid you go to a place where you're not in the luxury market. right? Because it can look a whole lot worse, you know. So we've talked about this. It's the extractive model, right? It takes big money to play in a big pond. So it's only accessible to those guys who have lots of money to play with. You know, they're playing regulatory arbitrage. What do I mean when I say that? I mean that they are going through every line in the code book, trying to squeeze every last dollar out of every last allowable square foot that they can put on a given site, because they're looking at rate on return, because most of them are publicly traded companies, right? They're looking to maximize return for their investors. It's not wrong. It's just the business model, right? Okay. It's just reality. So we need to recognize that. Oh, and by the way, you know, all this big new stuff, guess what? Anybody at the city could tell you it's really expensive to provide all the infrastructure for that. And it's even more expensive to maintain that infrastructure for 30, 40, 50 years. Okay. That all costs tax dollars. You know, if your city's not producing the tax revenue it needs to pay for that, that's a problem. It's car dependent, in Texas, I'm the same way. I drive a lot of places, but let me tell you, we're recognizing increasingly that being car dependent is a huge cost, and it hurts the most vulnerable among us the most, right? So who am I talking about? The poor, the elderly, the incapacitated, right? If you live in a place where your only option is to get in a car, you're severely curtailing people's quality of life. So we want to provide options. I'm not saying we got to get rid of our cars, because that's not going to happen, right? But we need to be able to provide things that are walkable. So we actually are providing a place that works for all of us. It's mass produced and it's fragile, right? So like that tower in the background, the condo tower, what could that building ever possibly do other than be a condo tower or a huge apartment building? Is it ever going to be offices? No. Is it ever going to be a warehouse? No. Is it ever going to be a factory? No. Is it ever going to have retail shops? No. It can only do one thing. And what happens if that one thing doesn't work or is no longer viable? You've got a big vacant building, right? And we see this everywhere across America, right? We see big vacant buildings that at one time were really, really important to the local economy and were considered great things, but guess what? They couldn't adapt. So we're talking about an alternative here, a time-tested approach. So this is just a little house from one of the many neighborhoods that we've done work in. And this is a triplex. It probably started off its life as a single family residence. And then over time, they added two units, right? There's a little garage apartment in the back, and there's a little duplex unit. So this is now a duplex up front and a little garage apartment. Okay. And when you're walking on the street, this is unremarkable, right? It blends in with the neighborhood. This is, the people who live there are not some sort of lesser class of human being, because a lot of times multifamily housing is a dirty word, but guess what? This is multifamily housing, but it's gentle, right? This is something that goes in our neighborhood. These people are our neighbors, right? Our kids play with their kids. They go to the same school. We know them. We see them at the local block party or the 4th of July parade, okay? This is a regenerative model, okay? That means it's accessible to people like you, okay? It builds on existing infrastructure, so you're not creating new liabilities for the city that you can't possibly pay for in tax revenue. It's responding to local needs. It's walkable, and it appeals to multiple different types of people at different stages of their life, okay? And, places like this, there's the old Gertrude Stein said, she was talking about a place one time. She said, there's no there, right? Well, places like this, there's a there, right? This is a someplace to a lot of people, especially the people who live there, grow up there. Okay. It's a place that they know and love. And these are places that can make it through tough times, because everybody knows times aren't always going to be good, right? There's always going to be things we can't control, but these are places that can make it through those types of times. And this isn't just residential stuff we're talking about, right? The same thing applies to commercial, right? Everyone's seen a dead strip mall. Everyone's seen a dead big box store. And those things require a ton of upfront capital. They require a lot of money and land, and then they're disposable. I mean, I'm here to tell you, in Bryan, Texas, I could take you down Texas Avenue in the middle of town, which is our old Highway 6, and show you the history of the American strip mall from about 1950 to about 1989. Right? And you can just see as you go down the road, one after another, they get newer and newer, and the older one went vacant, and then people moved to the newer one, and so on and so forth. Right? So, but truth is, your neighbors do it better. This is actually a picture of downtown Bryan, right? And all these little buildings. We had a downtown facade grant program. This is everything from people who make loans to lawyers. We have a little movie theater. We've got a music venue, a couple of restaurants, pub. There's an old hotel. There's an event space down here. There's some apartments, all sorts of stuff. And it's all locally owned. These are all local businesses and people who decided to invest in that place. And these buildings have done a lot of different things over the years, right? It's not always looked like this. When we talk about weathering tough times, I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen the music video of Lyle Lovett, This Old Porch song. Well, it's actually shot in downtown Bryan in the early 90s, and everything is boarded up and vacant and worn down. And it was a place that no one ever thought would come back. And this is what it is today, right? So this is real. This is real stuff. So I've alluded to this before, talking about tax revenue and paying for stuff. So I'm going to get a little wonky on you for just a minute. So bear with me, right? Urban 3 is a land use consulting firm founded by some guys. They're based out of Asheville, North Carolina. And what you see here is a map of a city. I believe this is Lafayette. Yeah, this is Lafayette, Louisiana. It's a map of Lafayette mapped to tax revenue versus infrastructure liabilities. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So the tax revenue that's brought in by the building on each individual land parcel compared to the cost of the infrastructure associated with servicing that parcel. And what do you think? So what do we think all the green stuff is? It's downtown, right? Guess what all the red stuff is? It's all the suburban big box stuff at the edge of town, right? This sort of suburban auto-oriented only large scale development costs more to maintain than it generates in tax revenue. Meaning the cost of putting in the pipe and the sewer and the water and the electricity and maintaining it over the long haul and replacing it in 30 or 40 years is far more for those big car dependent uses than they will ever create in tax revenue. Okay. So what we're really talking about is human scaled walkable stuff carries a lot more density of value, both to you as the citizen and to the city, and means it actually pays its own way. Everything else is a net loser, meaning it's costing you more money. It's like a hole in your pocket. Okay. So, a lot of people talk about green stuff. Some communities are more worried about this, place like Corpus, you've got a lot of tourism, right? You're worried about all this stuff, but guess what? You don't need high rises to be environmentally friendly. And you don't need high rises to have a city that is very valuable on a per acre basis. So, this is just where we are. And this isn't just Texas. It's not just Corpus Christi. It's pretty much everywhere in America that we've built since the 1940s, which is we've prioritized growth, and it's done a lot of good things for us. But in the long run, it's bankrupting us. It's costing us too much money. And cities, unlike the federal government, don't have the advantage of printing money. And they don't have the advantage of being the sovereign currency and writing their own debt, right? Cities have to pay money back when they do bond issuances. And if you're not making enough money in tax revenue, guess what? You'll never pay it back. So you have to have buildings and development that's net winners, that's dense on a per acre basis in terms of value. You can think of it like a farmer. A farmer has his acreage, and every year that farmer is trying to improve the quality of the crops in the farm, in the land, because the farmer doesn't have the option of just chucking it and going down the road, right? The farmer has to think in a multi-generational basis, am I improving this, for my children, my grandchildren, okay? And that land is all he has to earn his income. So, if you want to really nerd out on this stuff, one of our sort of allied organizations that we do a lot of work with and that we think really highly of is called Strong Towns. They just released a book that goes into a whole lot of detail about how this stuff works and how the municipal math works. The guy who started it's a former civil engineer who used to work on big transportation projects. Really interesting stuff. So I highly encourage, if you're interested more in this stuff, definitely check it out. So, so getting to green, and I don't mean environmentally friendly green, right? I mean, how do we get to this stuff? How do we get to the downtown? How do we get to the stuff that pays its own way? Well, okay. So think of it like we're practicing urban dentistry, right? First, fill in the missing holes. If you have vacant lots, if you have vacant buildings, fix them up, do something with them, right? Reuse existing buildings when possible. Work with each other to help out, and get the flywheel going, right? Get the process going, because it just happens one building, one project at a time. Because remember we said this before, no one's going to do it for you. No one's going to come solve your problems. They're just not. It's not how it works. So let's talk about this, because I think it's important for us to understand how this applies, especially when we talk about growth in a city. So let's talk about creating a job versus building wealth. So this is one, on the left, we have a picture of a Dunkin' Donuts. On the right, we have a local donut shop, mom and pop type of deal. And this is not to beat up on Dunkin' Donuts or any other chain, restaurant, business, franchise, anything like that. I don't want you to get the wrong idea, okay? Lord knows I like a good donut just as much as anybody else, okay? But what I want to illustrate to you is the differences in the economic models of these businesses and how those differences play out in the larger context of a local city, okay? So on the left, you have the franchise, right? To start a Dunkin' Donuts, it takes about $500,000 of cash up front just to pay the franchise fee, get the building, all that sort of stuff, right? Most franchise owners are not local. A lot of folks who own franchises own a lot of franchises, and usually they're banking with somebody who's not in your town. Highly unlikely. Well, what does that mean? We've talked about that before. If they send their money to a bank that's not in your town, then that bank is using that money to loan out to people somewhere else, okay? Meaning that wealth is getting exported out of your local economy. Now, there are some jobs associated with this, right? You're paying a store manager, you're paying one or two folks who work there, and you might pay them, let's say you're paying them really nicely and it's like Buc-ee's and you give them $15 an hour to start. Maybe that's great. But that's pretty much as far as it goes, right? On the right, you have the mom and pop. And this is actually a donut shop in one of the developments of one of our founding members, Monty Anderson. This is up in, I believe this is in Midlothian, south of Dallas. So this is the type of shop you build that $500,000 over a lifetime, right? So they bought this building with a mortgage. Okay, Monty built the building, helped them fit it out. They bought the building. There's a little apartment unit in back. Okay, the family lived in the apartment when they were getting the business off the ground and ran the donut shop. Okay, and guess what? They do business with the local bank, and they're a local business owner, and they're part of the community. Okay, so what happened? Well, the business was a great success. Everybody loves coffee and donuts, right? So they eventually, the family moved out of that apartment. They bought their first house that they'd ever owned. They lease out the apartment to a tenant now, so they have some rental income. They still operate a successful business, and they live within walking distance of their business and their kids' school. Okay, and they now have equity and a stake in that community. And they are reintroducing wealth into their community. Okay, that's the American dream right there. Okay, and that's what we're talking about. So, this is all about you. This is all about your family, your community, your neighborhood, and doing the things that are going to make those people and places strong and resilient over time. Okay. So we're going to talk about this stuff real quick. The bottom line is a lot of people they hear all this and there's no way I can do this. So let's talk about what that is. I was telling you earlier, okay, the development industry is rough. It's not focused on people like you. It's focused on big companies, big projects, right? All that is true. But let's look at this. I used to do a little management consulting. So every consultant loves the little quadrant chart, right? So we're going to break out the quadrant chart. On the y-axis, we have corporate and institutional financing. Think big money. Wall Street banks, big equity partners, private equity firms, that type of thing. On the bottom, we have entrepreneurial and bootstrap. That's things like my Uncle Dan gave me $1,500. I took a loan from the Small Business Administration. I took a mortgage from a local bank. It's real small stuff, small dollar stuff, okay? On the x-axis, we have small and incremental development. So that's the stuff we were talking about earlier, right? 0 to 3 stories. Okay. Can do locally built, locally renovated, can do lots of things over time. On the right, we have large and master planned. Well, in the upper right corner, that's where the entirety of the big development industry is focused, because you can't finance 2,000 homes in a subdivision with bootstrap financing, right? You've got to have a lot of money come to play to build that many homes. Okay. And if you've got $10 million to spend, you're not going to do onesies and twosies projects. You're going to do a big project where you're getting as much return out of that money as you can. So they're focused up there, right? And you can see mismatch objectives, mismatch operating requirements. So, you're not going to do a small and incremental project with $10 million of institutional money, but the opportunity here is to do the small projects with bootstrap and entrepreneurial financing. And so who does this? Well, local people like you, people like me, okay? Folks who who are willing to go do the work and do those projects that, quite frankly, the big developers aren't interested in. You know, a big home developer, they're only interested in your neighborhood if they can buy all the homes in the neighborhood, tear them down, and build something on top of them. I mean, that's the truth. You know, you are the ones who are interested and have the know-how and relationships to find those small opportunities and do those small projects. And there's a lot of opportunities out there. Everyone can name a building, a vacant lot, some piece of property that could be redone, revitalized, and really successful in your community. I guarantee you, you've walked past one of those types of properties and gotten a case of the somebody oughtas, right? You walk past, you say, somebody ought to do something with that. Well, guess what? That somebody is you. Because the only limiting factor for how many of these projects get done truly is how many people have the wherewithal, the know-how, and the relationships and the desire to go do this work. That's the limiting factor. It's you. We got to have more people like you. And that's where you come in, right? And so anyone can do this. So this is me. I told you before, I did not start in the real estate development business. I started in the Marine Corps as an infantry officer. And I promise that the Marine Corps did not teach me how to build buildings. They taught me how to blow buildings up. Okay. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I had to find something else to do. And, you know, when I actually took a job doing consulting for a year for a big, large government contractor, and I hated that job. But the plus side was that I moved to a very little, small, historic town in Maryland. And it really made me realize how the quality of a place really affected the well-being of the people who live there. And I really got interested in it. And so I eventually moved back to Texas, quit my job in consulting, and started getting into this field. And I was lucky enough to find some mentors who eventually were some of the founding members of Incremental Development Alliance, who helped me learn the ropes. And that's how I got started in this business. So this is not something that, it doesn't require genius, because I guarantee you I'm not a genius, right? If a dumb grunt can do it, so can you. You know, and this is what I'm doing today, right? We've got my firm, we have a lot, a whole city block in the north end of our downtown, which used to be a light industrial area, so a lot of vacant land now. We bought it several years ago from the city, and we're slowly filling it up with buildings. You know, that's what I've been doing for the past 6 years now. You know, it's hard work, and there are days when I really don't like it. But I'll tell you, there is nothing as satisfying as seeing a project like this come out of the ground and seeing people live there and having people come up to you and tell you how much they love living there and being there. I mean, it's amazing. There's not another feeling like it. Knowing that you are contributing in a real way to somebody's flourishing in life. It's amazing, you know, and you can do this work. I promise you. You know, I said earlier, you know, it's not rocket science, and it's really not. You know, it's kind of like you're building a pyramid, one little block at a time, but that baseline is learn about the essentials of a strong neighborhood. What does that mean? Well, what makes a place successful and what makes a place unsuccessful? What makes a good neighborhood and a bad neighborhood? And most of that's intuitive, right? Most people can walk down the block and tell you exactly what's wrong with their neighborhood, you know? And if you give them enough time, they might tell you even more than you ever wanted to know what's wrong with their neighborhood, right? So the next thing that you need to do is learn how a building makes money. right? Those are the two fundamental things. And guess what? That's what we do. That's what we teach. How do you make money with the building? And it's not craziness, but this is what we're going to be teaching in our workshop and then later on in our boot camp. So we will take you through projects. We'll teach you how do you draw a hasty site plan. You know, what does that mean? That means if I take a piece of land, how do I figure out what building I can put on it? How do I draw a footprint of a building on that site? And then how do I run the numbers to make sure that the building makes money? You know, how do I take that to a bank and explain to them that the building makes money? How do I take that to the city and make sure that I'm following all the rules and regulations? Right. And then what does it take after that? Well, you got to find your farm, right? So we say that a lot. Finding your farm just means this is a place that you live, that you love, that you're willing to commit to and cultivate for the long haul, right? You're not going to parachute in and do a project in a neighborhood you don't know anything about with people you don't know, right? This is the place that you live, the place that you work. Okay, this is your place. You know, and we think that's important. You know, there are a lot of people who have come to our trainings who say, well, there's this neighborhood on the other side of town where I think there are a lot of good opportunities, but, you know, I'm living in my house that, you know, I'm really comfortable in. And I don't really want to go there. I just want to do a project there. And I always have to tell people, stop right there. You've made a mistake, because this work is about doing developments and projects in your place. And if that's not your place, then you don't need to be doing them there. Okay. You need to be doing the work in a place that you love. And a good way to think about that is, you know, if a horrible fire swept through that neighborhood or that district in your city that you're talking about tomorrow and burned down a bunch of things, if you would not be heartbroken over that, then that's not your place. Okay. It's the place that you love, because that's the only type of place that you're really going to commit to in the long haul. And this doesn't have to be your whole profession, right? Not everyone is going to become a full-time developer, but every development requires that type of commitment. It really does, because the work's hard. You know, it may be simple, but it's not easy. Okay, and you have to be willing to make that sort of commitment to it. And frankly, that's the only way you're ever going to get the local support system in place that's going to carry you through the tough times. You know, if you're always the outsider, you're never going to have that emotional connection to the people who are going to help carry you through when something doesn't go according to plan. And there will be times like that. And so you need to make sure that wherever you're working and doing projects is a place where you have those relationships. So, and that's what we're talking about. You got to hustle. You got to make a building make money. So what does that mean, practically speaking? Take the next smallest step. You know, a lot of times people think that I've got to go from vacant lot that no one's had a building on in 30 years to awesome 3-story mixed use building with the coffee shop and the hip apartments. And frankly, that's probably not going to happen. You know, you need to do basic things like, maybe I just do some really nice landscaping and make it a little pocket park until I can do something with it. Or one of our founding members, Monty Anderson, he works in Duncanville, Texas, which is south of Dallas. very working class, low rents, not a lot of rich people running around Duncanville looking to pay a lot for apartments, right? So a lot of times he'll do stuff like get a local entrepreneur, usually a high school student or somebody who wants to start a business, and they'll do things like start a snow cone stand. Because everybody knows in August, snow cone sounds really good when it's 115 degrees outside, right? Or he had one guy start a tamale stand who eventually started a tamale restaurant, brick and mortar, right? So these are things that can happen, but it's what's that next smallest step I can take that will make this viable? Okay, bite off really small chunks of risk. Don't bite off a huge chunk of risk, because if it doesn't pan out, well, you'll be a former developer, not a current developer. And then it's repeat. Find the small thing, do the small thing, repeat, rinse, repeat. Okay. This is what you might envision that would look like. Let's say you have a little neighborhood and you start by working with the city to get a new crosswalk put in. I'm sorry. And then you do something like fix up a little garden next to a school, or have a meetup spot or a market stall. Maybe build a small fourplex later on, or fix up an old live work building, right? And you're doing this over, let's say 5 years, 10 years, whatever it takes, right? You're doing it over time. You're doing those next smallest project, the next smallest project. Well, pretty soon you do enough small projects in a really concentrated area, and that neighborhood starts to look totally different, right? I had a good developer friend of mine tell me one time, he's sort of a master at this. He said, if I can take a residential neighborhood block, let's say it's a real rundown neighborhood. He said, let's say there are 10 houses on the street. He said, if I can fix up 3 of those houses, then all of a sudden that changes people's psychological perception of what that neighborhood is and what that block is like. Because before, they might go down that block and say, oh my gosh, nobody wants to be here. I wouldn't want to be here after dark. And now if there are 3 brand new renovated cottages on that block, people drive by and they say, oh, things are on the up, right? Things are looking good. Things are improving, right? And that was his rule of thumb, right? 30%, 3 out of 10. Well, you do a lot of little projects in a really concentrated area over time, you're going to get there. And pretty soon, other people are going to get there too, right? Because you're not just working by yourself, you're working with friends and neighbors, colleagues, right? Other people who are trying to do good stuff in your neighborhood too. And it's a self-reinforcing upward trend, because that rising tide raises all the boats, right? It's not a winner take all big development. That's why I say, everywhere I work and do projects, if other people are doing projects nearby, that's great. It only makes my project better and more valuable, because I don't want to be on an island. I want to be in a neighborhood where all sorts of other cool stuff is going on, so that people are down there all the time and want to be there. I don't want to be the lone nice building in a sea of crap, So think about that, so you're helping your neighbors do the same. That's what we just talked about, and not everyone is going to be a developer, right? This is everyone from your attorney who you hire, to your friend, to your drywaller or carpenter who lives in that neighborhood. All sorts of people create the neighborhood ecosystem that makes that work. Okay. And that's how you create that flywheel effect. And that's really what it's about, and if there's any secret sauce here, it's caring, right? You have to care. You know, a lot of people get in this business just for the money, in just real estate in general. And they don't last. And that's the truth of it. They don't stick around because eventually there'll be hard times. There's always downturns in a market, and they'll go find something else to do. But the people who are really successful over the long term, they care and they commit. You know, and that applies to people who do this full time for a living, and that applies to people who maybe they only do one project in their life, and it's building a garage apartment behind their house to supplement their mortgage, right? Those people care, plain and simple. So, and that's what it's all about. So, what could this look like on the ground? Well, there's a lot of stuff when we were talking about those 0 to 3 story buildings, right? And this is what we call STEP buildings. And STEP is an acronym, stands for small scale, time enhanced, entrepreneurial, and purposeful. And it's really just goes along with the philosophy we've talked about, right? It's one step at a time that you're building projects and buildings that improve your city, and those buildings and projects improve with age. Okay. They are adapted to today's regulations. So whatever you need it to do today, it can do today. And maybe tomorrow it needs to do something else, and you can change it. And, you know, I love this quote. It's that, you know, neighborhood is what you make it, and I want to make mine better. Right. And that's the philosophy you want to have. So, you know, and it's everything from the pop-up tent and the push cart to the big Main Street building with apartments above and commercial downstairs, right? So there are a couple of families in this of different things you can do. And we talk more about this in our training, but this is just to expose you to kind of what's out there. What are we talking about? Okay, you can do house hacks. That's everything from adding a flex shed behind my house. Maybe I have an Airbnb unit built behind the house, or I have an attached guest suite, or ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. Think like outside in-law suite, or granny flat is what they're sometimes called, right? A lot of times people have multi-generational families living in one house, right? Sometimes it's nice if, you know, my great grandmother, who's 97 years old, and she's living with us, if she has her own apartment that she lives in behind the house, you know. So that's a way to adapt an existing home to do a lot of different things, whether it's provide for family members and diversify your housing options, or generate a little extra income and supplement your mortgage. There are all sorts of ways to modify just your existing house to help you do that. Commercial incubation. So if you're a small business owner, or you want to help someone start a small business, right? They don't have to move into a brick and mortar store immediately. They can start with a tent, you know, at a farmer's market. I know plenty of small businesses that have literally started that way, at the farmer's market with a pop-up tent. And they eventually built a business and have a brick and mortar store. You know, you can talk about what we call missing middle housing. You know, this is everything from a duplex to a 12-plex, the sorts of small scale apartment living that you see a lot of from, especially from like the 1920s and 30s and teens. Okay. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with San Antonio, but San Antonio has some great examples of old buildings like this. You know, it's a 6-plex or a 12-plex. It's sort of usually on a corner lot at the edge of an existing residential neighborhood. They're usually really cool architecture. And when people fix them up, they're really great. And they can be really great for a community and really great projects, right? Neighborhood node. So this is everything from the small corner store, commercial services, little shop, okay? And the key here is that these things are walkable. They're usually in walking distance of your residential neighborhood. You know, and that's what we really want, right? This is providing services for the people who live in the neighborhood. Okay. There's always going to be a place for Home Depot, right? Okay. There just is. And I'm not going to lie to you and say that there's not. I go to Home Depot probably once a week, or other big box stores, Target, Walmart, same thing. There's nothing wrong with those places, right? But we need more than those types of places. We need all those services, the little cool neighborhood restaurant. Okay. How many people wish, that they had a neighborhood restaurant that was 3 blocks from their house that they could go have a great meal or a drink on Saturday night, right? Almost everybody wishes they could have that, right? That's what we're talking about. And these are real, okay? We have people all over the country who have done stuff like this. So the guy here in the center, this is Monty Anderson. He's one of our founding members. And these are 2 of his youngest tenants and some of the youngest entrepreneurs. That's a brother and sister. I believe the brother at this time was, I think he was 12 or 13. His sister, I think, was a year older. And Monty bought an old grocery store in a strip mall in DeSoto, which is south of Dallas, and fixed it up and created little micro commercial spaces for people. And they started their own snow cone business out of the space, right? So they have a actual business making money at 12 and 13 years old. I mean, that's amazing. I can assure you, I was not in that league when I was 12 or 13 years old. Right? You can do things like house hacks. This is another alumni project. Eric Kronberg, he owns an architecture firm in Atlanta. He's another one of our faculty members. Eric bought a historic home in Atlanta that had, it was from about 1915, and this house had quite a bit of land behind it. And so he built this little street, and he created this little cul-de-sac of tiny little houses with kind of cool accessory dwelling units and other stuff, right? And he was really good about knowing what the zoning code allowed and what the people wanted and needed. So this is a 2-bed accessory dwelling unit with an attached guest suite, right? So wrap your head around that one. So pretty cool stuff. This is some stuff that we did in Bryan. These are just 2 of the buildings we've got on the ground here now. We had some vacant land, put two fourplexes on them with 2 little small offices. This is another one of our alumni, Alyssa Shelton. She bought an old bank in a place called Hamtramck, which is a suburb of Detroit. And she's turned it into a community pop-up commercial space. Really, really cool building. Another one of our alumni, he fixed up an old duplex in Kalamazoo, Michigan. This is the bottom floor that he rents out, and he lives upstairs. This is another one of our faculty members and alumni, Jen Acosta. She's up in Michigan in the Bay City area. And this is a historic building that was covered up in this awful 1950s cladding that they peeled off and created this, just unveiled this beautiful old historic brick building. All of her ground floor tenants are now local entrepreneurs, and she's got apartments up above. I mean, super, super cool, cool space. Bernice Radel, another one of our faculty members. She's in Buffalo, New York, fixed up old commercial building, have some apartments above. So this is what we're talking about. And how does this happen, right? Remember, we talked about this before. You can do this full time. You can do this as a side business, right? This doesn't have to be a career change for you if that's not what you're looking for. All it takes is that you really commit to it, okay? But maybe you just want to do one project. Maybe that's all you're really looking for. Maybe you really want to do this full time, okay? You can do both, but you just need to know what you want going in, right? It takes investors. I was like a lot of people. I started in this business with no money, and that, I wasn't, I don't have a trust fund. I wasn't, born, with lots of financial resources to put into this stuff. And so, a lot of it just came down to cultivating relationships where people believed in me enough to where they were willing to put their money into a project that I was doing, and they believed in the project. And then getting those loans, right? Local lenders who wanted to support us. And then last but not least, like, you've got to have those people who, even if they're not doing development, that they're championing what you are doing. And they could work at the city, they could be community activists or advocates, right? But these are the people who are going to show up to the local meetings, and the zoning appeals board and things like that, and advocate for good things. And we can't do this work without those types of people. So if that's you today in the audience, and you're just here to learn more, I wanted to let you know that you are an integral part of this sort of work as well. So, that's what we're talking about. It's addition by subtraction. And sometimes people can say, your role in this can change over time, right? Maybe you're not ready to do a project, financially, personally, whatever it is, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I definitely encourage you to contact us if you're sort of feeling lost, but you really want to get involved, but you don't feel like you're ready to take the leap and get started on a project. We can definitely help put you on the right track. So I want to encourage you there. So remember, we talked earlier about what do we do with cities? We help coach them to help them help you, right? This is what we do with them. So we go to different cities and we run a diagnostic or a clinic and basically say, what's legal and what is illegal to build in your city? And then we compare it to what they say they want to build in their city. And lo and behold, in a lot of places we work, they say they want all these beautiful things that they put into a master plan. And in a lot of places, their zoning code makes those things expressly illegal to build. So we help them work through those issues, right? We put them through a development simulation where the city staff has to actually go through and try to come up with a site plan that fits their existing zoning code and building code and other parameters, and see if they can get it done. What are the parking requirements? What are the zoning requirements? All that sort of stuff. So we help those city employees, those planners and building development folks, understand your pain and understand what you are going through. And hopefully, if there are problems, we help them identify those issues so that they can fix them, so that hopefully y'all can both get what you want, which is good projects on the ground. So how do I get started? Well, do you have any of the following? Okay. Do you already own a property of any size or kind? Vacant land, existing house, whatever it is. Do you own any sort of real estate property? Do you have a business that needs a home? Right? Are you a small business owner running out of your house? Maybe you're renting from somebody else. Maybe you're trying to get it off the ground and you don't know where you're going to go, right? Do you have some savings or cash, or do you have access to credit? Okay. Or do you have people who are willing to invest or lend? Okay. Do you have any skills related to the development process? And the last two, I think, are the most important, because all those other things you can go out and get. But these last two, you have to have. They're the non-negotiables, right? And that is, do you have hustle and local relationships? Are you willing to do the work and be there for the people? And the last one is, do you have a why? Do you have a burning reason for doing this? Because if you don't, you'll quit. It's just reality. You will. But if you have that reason that sort of keeps you awake at night about why you want to do this and why it's important to you, then you'll never quit and you will be successful. Okay. So, and that's, you know, the how and the why, they matter. You know, because this stuff alone isn't going to save you or save your town or save your city from all the other external things that are going on in the world, right? A hurricane could hit Corpus Christi tomorrow and everything we've talked about is going to take a back seat to that, right? The market could crash tomorrow and things will be really, really difficult for an indefinite period of time, right? There are always bad things that can happen in the world, and there are always things that are going to be affecting your market and your place that you can't do anything about. Okay. But I want you to remember that you are the one who is best poised to make change in your community. Because when things are going poorly, when the market goes bad, when there's a natural disaster, the people who are not interested in dealing with it and the people who are going to be out first are the big guys. You know, something bad happens, they're going to retrench to New York or Los Angeles or Chicago or wherever they go. And everywhere else is going to be left holding the bag. You know, and that's where people like you come in. It's people who care, who have skin in the game. You know, the people who love the place and want to create buildings and projects that people love. The people who are willing to hire their neighbors and friends to get things done and collaborate with them. Okay. And the people who are there every day, who know in their guts what's going on in a neighborhood, what your neighborhood needs. Okay, what the people desperately want, and finding out a way to get it. Okay. And that's what we do. We're training you to rebuild your neighborhood, to be that change, right? We want you to be able to bring out the best in your place. And that's going to be in good times, in really great markets, and that's going to be in tough times, you know, where things are really tough. But at the end of the day, you and the work that you do is what makes a place a place. And it's what puts the there. And so I want to encourage y'all to come out to our trainings. And I want to encourage you to really think about embarking on this work, because I think that you can do great things in your city, in Corpus. Okay, it's a great town. You've got lots of opportunities. We've had really, really cool meetings with your city officials, talking about all the things that people would like to be doing and like to be doing more of. And so we hope that you'll join us. With that, I'll turn it over to Alex, and she's going to talk real quick about the trainings that we have coming up and how you can get signed up.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. A lot of great information. And I know it was a lot of information just in this, hour and a half. So a lot of you might be like, okay, well, what's next? This is all great information. I want to learn more. I want to keep going. And the City of Corpus Christi is sponsoring what's typically our one-day workshop. Typically when we're in person, we wish that we could be with you in person, but virtually we've broken up the one-day workshop into 2 4-hour days. And this is really a course on skills assessment, project conceptualization, some of the things that we walk through again, the incremental approach. It's just kind of a brief overview of everything that we talked about today. We go through business models and skill sets, right sizing, building arts, market research and site selection, zoning, We really dive a lot deeper into financial analysis and performas. We do some work with performas in this workshop. Development simulation, again, financials keeps popping up, but talking about how do you actually finance your project and buying a property. So it is definitely a lot of information, a lot of really, really great information with so many takeaways from this next training event. Bryan, if you could go to the next slide. So again, this is taking place on March 31st and April 1st from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. both days, and that's Central Time. And this is a ticketed event. So as you'll see, the early bird rate starts at $180. The regular registration is $210 and last minute is $240. This is virtual via Zoom, and it's going to be a lot more kind of question and answer. There's going to be content-driven sessions, but there is, a lot more time to utilize our faculty members for this training series. Registration is required for this event. There is also scholarships available for locals who are doing projects or thinking of doing projects in Corpus Christi. I will drop the registration information will be in this creatingcc.com website. It'll also be available via our website. I'll drop the link in the chat. And all of the additional information, more about the workshop, the scholarship application, everything will be on that IncDev page. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'll put my email address in the chat as well. And another perk for registering, the first 20 registrants get one of our bound printed workbooks, along with all of the digital materials that everyone receives regardless with signing up. And I will drop that information in the chat.
Thanks, Alex. Well, I hope this has been inspiring. I hope that you will think about joining us in the trainings. We're really excited to be working in Corpus Christi. As a native Texan, as someone who's your neighbor for not too far down the road, I'm really excited to see the work that y'all will be doing. I can stick around for just a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions that they want to ask before we conclude for the evening, but feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can I think you can do the raise hand feature, and you can ask it for the group if you want to do that too.
Any recommendations on books to read? I have a few, but Ryan, I'm sure you know.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot. So
yeah, there's a lot.
I think depending on what you're looking for, I think the Strong Towns book is really helpful to just kind of understand from a nuts and bolts level what makes places successful. And it's really focused on what makes a town or community financially resilient, which I think is underappreciated by the average person. So I think that's really helpful. There are a lot of great books on design out there. There's a lot of great books on urbanism. It really depends on what you're looking to get into. So, I mean, if you could drop in the chat, I can only give you so much information for a very general overview.
Yeah, Color of Law is another really good one. If you guys have not read that one yet.
Says, we have so many vacant buildings. How do we get these filled up and successful or taken down and made green again? I think you have to take every building on a case-by-case basis, right? I think too often we get wrapped around the axle of thinking in abstract terms about lots of different places. And the truth is, a building in one neighborhood on one parcel is going to be totally different from another building in another neighborhood. They're just not, they're not exchangeable. Every building plays a different role in its neighborhood. And so, a lot of filling up vacant buildings is about having a tenant in your pocket or being the tenant yourself, right? So Classic example of a small business owner who decides to buy a building, fix it up, and maybe they don't occupy the whole building. Maybe they have a tenant who occupies, half of it or part of it or whatever it is. And that could be a residential apartment or that could be another business, right? It doesn't really matter. But that's probably a really classic way of doing it. But typically with vacant stuff like that, lenders, banks, they're going to want to see that you have someone committed to occupying that building and paying rent to cover the mortgage payments. So that's usually where we start.
Any other questions? And if you guys want to unmute, feel free to. Yes, a question came in just about the scholarship process. So the scholarship application is on the website. It's, I believe, about 20 questions or so. It just takes a couple minutes to apply. And the scholarship decisions are at the discretion of the city, and we will be notifying folks. The deadline for the scholarship application is March 4th. Just so everyone knows, and the ticketing is on a tiered timeline as well for early bird, regular, and last minute. All of that is on the webpage as well. I will get the recording of this video out to everyone no later than Monday, end of business, and you all will be able to review and watch again. Seems like that's all we got. Again, I will drop my email in the chat one more time here. If anyone has any other questions about the training or any other logistical items, please feel free to send me an email. That's what I'm here for. There we go. And thank you everyone for taking the time this evening. I know everyone's probably doing their dinner and whatnot, but we really appreciate this, and we appreciate the support of everyone who attended and the support of the City of Corpus Christi.
Thanks, y'all. Looking forward to seeing some of y'all in the trainings.
Thank you all. Take care.
Recording stopped.